Hi. For a lot of this week, I'm reacting to videos talking about anger. And the reason I'm looking at anger so carefully is that people in recovery sometimes relapse not because of temptation or cravings, but out of anger and frustration. It can be very much sort of like quitting a job. That I'm just sick of this, and I need to have some fun. Or I'm sick of this and forget it all. I'm just going to go get drunk or get high. So I'm looking at various people on YouTube and some solutions they have for managing anger and giving a reaction. How do I think this would work? And are there any Christian supplements or changes or additions to what I'm hearing? This time I'm looking at Jordan Peterson, Anger and Depression, and it looks like it is from a university lecture. Jordan Peterson, obviously the Canadian psychologist, famous for his many entanglements with mainstream news reporters, among other reasons. He's also got a fabulous history as a research scientist. So let's take a look at the video, and I'll give you my reaction.
In an elementary discussion of the role of comparator systems in the brain, which we'll talk about in more detail, the general notion is that the violation of an expectation produces anxiety. And that's a pretty good model. And it's got some support from the psychophysiological, pharmacological literature, because if you give animals anti-anxiety agents like benzodiazepines or alcohol or barbiturates, they do respond less to the violation of, quote, expectancy. It does dampen the response. But it's an oversimplified model, and to get understanding of human behavior correct, you have to expand it a bit. It isn't precisely that unpredicted outcome is a threat and it produces anxiety. It's that unpredicted outcome makes the irrelevant relevant, and it produces an undifferentiated emotional and motivational state. It's a better.
That's interesting. So if you're not expecting something, or something happens and you're not expecting it, or you're unable to know what to expect, what's happening is that it produces this kind of unresolved state, and things that might not be all that important to you now become hyper important. Yeah, I thought we were talking about anger here, not anxiety. I do think those two things are related, but let's see where this goes. My initial reaction, though, is that that's pretty true. Like, if you're out at night and you're not used to being in the woods, and you're just kind of hyper aware of everything, and everything kind of looks like it could be an animal or somebody coming up upon you, and you're not able to really distinguish between what's the important sounds, what are the unimportant sounds. Whereas if you're in an environment that you know very well and that you're very comfortable with, you're just blocking out 90% of anything that's not irrelevant. So I think that's what he's saying. If I'm getting that wrong, put that down in the comment section and correct me. But I think that's what he's saying, is that when things, yeah, I'll stop there.
Better way of thinking about it, because it isn't just that you don't just get anxious. For example, if something goes wrong, you get anxious, you get angry, you get curious, you get frustrated, you get depressed. Like, it's a whole bursting forward of emotions and motivational states. And that's because when something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, even when you just encounter an obstacle, it means that the way that you're construing the landscape is wrong in some manner. And you don't exactly know what you're going to have to do in order to fix that, unless it's a very trivial violation. And it's one that you know immediately how to redress.
So that's interesting. So it sounds almost like he's saying it's a big cognitive load. And by that I mean, if you're not sure what's happening and you're not sure what's next, everything's kind of happening at once. It's a lot to process, and you're feeling anger and anxiety. I think that makes sense to somebody in recovery. They may have known how the world fit together when they were using, and now they got to figure out a new reality, a new landscape without the use of alcohol and substances. How do I handle all these things that I either didn't have to handle before, or that I handled with the aid of alcohol and substances, or they just didn't bother me that much because, as he was saying, it kind of suppresses the upset that you feel when things don't go as planned. So that's pretty interesting as well. So maybe when you quit using alcohol and other drugs, maybe you get a bit more angry because that suppressed, that thing that was suppressed, where you didn't get really all that upset when things didn't meet expectations, didn't follow what you thought was going to happen. That's been suppressed for a while, and my understanding of when you suppress something, once you stop suppressing it, it rebounds and it actually goes higher than it was before. So that would be interesting, and that would certainly, hopefully, give some self-empathy to folks in recovery. If you're feeling a lot of frustration and anger, it may well be that you are experiencing a temporary rebound effect, and that eventually some of that stuff's going to come down, and you're going to be better able to handle the frustration and the upset. I hope that's true. I hope I'm drawing the right inference here.
Like if I'm, again, so I come around the corner and I look at that chair and I'm annoyed because it's in the way. You might think, well, how annoyed should I get? And the answer should be something like, your annoyance should be in proportion to the amount of time and energy it will take to move that chair. Right? Because that's kind of like a proper perception. So it's like, I should be that annoyed. I should be annoyed enough so that I've indexed doing that.
Oh, Jordan, would that it were true. I think that's the issue for those of us in recovery, is that it gets out of proportion, and things that maybe other people don't see as being that big of a hassle or that big of a problem or that big of an obstacle seem insurmountable to us. And because of shame and other things going on, simple things that wouldn't be an obstacle for someone else, social interactions, a job interview, attending church, sitting around other people, are inflated, and we're not accurately measuring how difficult it's going to be. And maybe it is just like realistically more difficult for someone in recovery, that these are new things. Other people have been handling chairs where they shouldn't be way more often than I have, and now I'm having to handle it on my own and without the assistance of alcohol, and I just don't have as much practice, and it's harder. And then there's stuff that happens when you're in recovery, like your kids get taken from you and you have legal charges and your girlfriend's upset at you, that actually produce more of these situations where you've got obstacles and you've got things that aren't going according to the plan because your plan keeps getting messed up because you keep getting high and drunk. So, yeah, that's what I'm taking from this anyway.
Because that does actually take some time and energy, and that actually has a cost, and the fact that I have to pay that cost should be signified by something, because otherwise I wouldn't be sensitive to costs. And so the annoyance, if it's in proportion to the effort, is exactly indexed properly. Now, often, unfortunately, you don't know how to index. So you have an old car, you're driving to work.
Okay, so he's anticipated my concern, is that I don't know how to index things properly, and I get bent out of shape about stuff that that maybe shouldn't be that big of a deal, and maybe I underestimate things that are a huge deal, and then I get frustrated because I've underestimated them, and they're turning out to be much more frustrating than I thought they were, and now I'm really ticked because I underestimated.
Someone bumps you from behind and then your car doesn't work. It's like, well, how annoyed should you get? You don't know. That's a problem. And so then all of a sudden a bunch of things that were irrelevant, which is the whole damn car, poof, become relevant. Plus you have to deal with this person that just ran into you, and what are they like? Well, they're stupid enough to run into you, so you don't know what else might be wrong with them, and maybe they're going to be a bunch of trouble, and you have to get their insurance information, and now you're on the side of the road and you don't know if you're going to go to work. And so that's when
you get me, Jordan. You get yes, the cascading improbable future outcomes that I can think of in my head are keep going. And he came up with some fairly maybe reasonable ones. Mine go farther into the less realistic, but that level of just kind of a churning bunch of questions that I'm not sure what to do with. Yep.
Your emotions can unravel because they're trying to compute the effort and time you're going to have to take in order to rectify this, and the span, what would you call it, the domain that is opening up as a consequence of the problem isn't easy to map. And so you get stressed. And you go home and you say, I had a stressful day. And the person says, what happened? Well, someone hit me on the highway. And they go, oh, that's terrible. They figure that out. It's like, well, I was in this little map. It was only this long. I was just going from here to here. And all of a sudden, poof! I didn't know where I was or how many places I was going to have to wander around in before I could get that map working again. But the car is an invisible predicate of multiple potential future maps as well. Right?
That is so good. Yeah, I was just going to go from here to work. That's all I wanted. Super simple. Now I got hit by a car. Now I'm going to have to deal with this. Now I'm going to have to deal with that. I don't know what the insurance company's going to say. I don't know if I got enough money. Yeah, that's exactly how it happens. He's talking about it in this really non-concrete way, or he's kind of vacillating back and forth between this super conceptual thing about the maps and the domain opening up and so on, and then he gives you a concrete example of what that's like. But that feels pretty much accurate to me in terms of what happens when I get angry. Good. The question I have now is, what do you do about that if your anger is getting you in trouble and causing you to relapse, or causing you to get so stressed out that you're like, forget it, I'm going to go use, or I don't know how to deal with this stuff. I'm better off just going back and using, or maybe somebody offers me something now and I'm so frustrated that I'm just in a vulnerable spot. What do you do about it?
It's an axiom. You make the map presuming that you have the car, and the car isn't a metal thing with wheels. The car is a conveyance for moving you from point A to point B. And the fact that you have all these maps of moving from point A to B that are predicated on that conveyance means that when it turns into a car instead of a conveyance, poof, all those maps become extremely complicated as well.
Yeah. Is my employer going to be okay with me having to take some time off to get this thing fixed? Am I going to be able to find somebody else who can take care of the car while I'm at work? And if I can figure out how to get the car to the garage, do I have the money to pay for it? Do I know which garage I should? Yeah, it's just endless series of hassles based on that one thing. And I wonder if this is true for other people, but for me, there's a sense of like, why is it so hard for me? Why? I think other people probably are handling this super, they're taking it in stride and they know where to go and they've got many of these things handled already. But I'm overwhelmed and don't know what to do. And each thing that I have to do is opening up another set of possibilities about who am I going to call? Do I get on the internet and look for stuff? Do I ask a friend to tow it? Do I know somebody who can fix it? What's that going to be like? Are they going to be thinking that I'm taking advantage of them? Like, there's just so many things that come up, and much of it, and I think probably come up for everybody, but maybe people in recovery are thinking the reason this is so stressful is because I'm just so terrible at managing life. And and each little bit of shame and anxiety that I feel is an indictment against me and my competence as an adult. And it's leading me closer and closer to just wanting to drink, to forget about how crappy I feel and how incapable I am of managing things that other people seem capable of managing. Jordan, I had no idea you were going to bring all this up. But yeah, it seems pretty accurate.
And so your body goes, well, my landscape is way more complex than I thought Up goes the heart rate, up goes the cortisol, all of that, right? And you're more paralyzed. And you can, like if you're a neurotic person, let's say, something like that can just paralyze you. You're done.
What are you saying, Jordan? What are you saying? I'm neurotic? Yeah, probably. And neurotic, for those who aren't in the club, just means that you experience a high level of negative emotion. And that stuff that I just talked about all the different questions and things opening up and me fretting about each and every one of them, that's a highly neurotic person. A person who's low in neuroticism doesn't experience as many negative emotions, doesn't think of as many negative possibilities. So yeah, so a neurotic person is just going to get paralyzed there. And then a drink sure sounds pretty good at that point. Escaping from this, from how difficult and challenging things are, sounds pretty darn good at that point. Again, so I think that may or may not be helpful. It's kind of stressing me out, actually, as I'm thinking about what it feels like to get angry. That may or may not be helpful to know that that's what's happening. It may or may not be helpful to know that other people experience that and that it's natural and normal. But I'm still kind of feeling like, what do I do here? What do I do about this, Jordan?
You have to phone someone for emergency help, which means you're in a map that you cannot put your map back together. You have to call on outside help in order to do it. So, and you might not even know how to do that.
And calling outside help is anxiety provoking. Are they going to judge me? Are they going to judge how little money I have in my bank account? Are they going to judge, the way my car looks? Are they going to judge the fact that I shouldn't have been driving the way I was driving? My experience of things, especially when I was first getting clean and sober, was I felt like everybody could just see it on me. They could see the insomnia and the drunkenness and the depression. They could just smell it on me, and all of it, again, like I said, it was an indictment against me as a person. So, yeah, well, way to go, Jordan. Got deep quick.
Okay, so that's another way. Now, here's another way of thinking about it. You want to stay inside this little map because it's working. You want to get from point A to point B, and this is good. This indicates that you are moving forward. That's the first thing it indicates. And the second thing it indicates, which is even more important, and you'll never hear this from behavioral psychologists, is that your map is correct. So every time you move a little bit forward and something that you want happens, it says, oh, the game I'm playing is the right game. And so not only does the reward indicate progress, it indicates that the frame within which progress is being calculated is the right frame. And that's good because it's the frame that makes things irrelevant. And you want them to stay irrelevant. So if...
Oh, that's good. Yeah, so what's happening when you're in recovery, I think you need little wins all the way along, because those little wins tell you that your map is correct. And if your map is correct, then I don't have to worry about all the irrelevant data. And it's the irrelevant stuff that makes me upset. When I feel like I understand things and this is how it works, that's when I'm calmer and I don't get angry. It also suggests that maybe, the idea of acceptance, that, okay, my map just got bigger. I'm just gonna learn to accept that it's a bigger map now and move forward. And, all right, I'll call somebody. Other people have had this happen before. I'll see where I can get the money for this. And start to move down that path, accepting that that's part of sober life, is that these car accidents happen and that they can be dealt with. And so maybe acceptance that the map got bigger is part of it too.
You don't move forward and you start to question the frame, that's way worse than merely not moving forward. You get a bad exam grade. What do you think? What the hell am I doing?
Yeah, that's really good. Maybe to think of like sobriety as the map forward, and when you feel like you're not getting success in it, you start to abandon that map, and then you go back to the old map of substance abuse. And I knew how that worked. I knew how to get alcohol. I knew how to get drugs. I knew how to do drugs. I knew how to be around people that did drugs. Doing this new thing is really anxiety provoking, which I think is a good reason to be in part of a supportive community of other people who've been there and are encouraging you, because that's probably natural. You're trying to do things a new way, and you don't know what to expect, and you're not sure what's normal in this new way of doing things. And the more people you have around you, and the more stories that you're collecting of people who've made this transition, the more you could start to believe in that sobriety map, and you know that brings down the anxiety and the anger, better able to resist things, less likely to throw the sobriety map away, and just go back to the using and the drinking map. Yeah, this is good.
Doing in university anyways. It's like, probably that's not the first place you should go with that piece of information. And you think, well, why? Why is that worse? Well, as far as I can tell, your map of you as a university student is a comprehensive representation. It tells you what you should do every day. It kind of tells you where you're going in the future. And if something emerges as an anomaly, you get a worse grade than you expected, and you blow that whole map, it's like, okay, what have you been doing for the last 4 years? What kind of high school student were you? How clueless are you about how you're arranging?
Yeah, so this is not something I deal with, but I'm guessing this is the issue for the perfectionist, is they've got a map that says I have to do everything perfect. I get one bad grade, and they go down this spiral. Yeah, interesting. Not an issue for me, the whole perfectionism thing, but that's kind of what this example sounds like to me.
Your future. What's your identity going to be if you're not going to be a student? Where are you going to end up in 5 years? It's like, so it's like that little grade, that bad grade is like a portal through which snakes can crawl. And that's exactly how you respond.
It's a good image. Yeah, and the snakes are just everything that you're afraid of and all those fearful and anxious thoughts that you have. So the one bad grade like kind of punctured your vision of what you were as a student, and now all these snakes have crawled in, and the snakes representing kind of the anxious and maybe angry thoughts.
Respond to it, especially if you open the door too much. Well, maybe this means that I shouldn't be in university. Well, one of the rules is you want to constrain the anomalous event to the minimal necessary domain. It's really, really important. You want to do that when you're arguing with your partner, which you'll do all the time. We have an argument. Well, I should never have married you. It's like, no, that's not the first response. That's a bad response. Or here's a really good one. You've always done that sort of thing, and you always will. It's like, oh, good, great. It's like the only answer to that is to hit someone, because like you're.
Yeah, that's some pretty standard CBT stuff, though, too. Like, so you want to limit it to what it actually is, not what all your thoughts of it are. And as I progressed in my sobriety, I actually found that I got pretty good at that. And that when other people were really freaking out about certain things at work, I was actually somebody who could take all of those thoughts that they were having and just reduce it to what is it? It's actually this. Yeah, I may not like this, but it's actually this. It's not all of this. And he's saying kind of the same thing. So if you have an argument with someone, you don't say, everything's wrong with you and it always will be. You're just like, no, we're talking about this one incident that you did, and it's not connected to all these other things, and we just deal with it as one incident. Same thing, I got one bad grade. That's what it means. It doesn't mean I'll never be a student and what am I going to do with my life. It means you got one bad grade. And anything else that you do above and beyond that, you're just kind of causing yourself suffering. It's starting to sound like somewhere between a Stoic and an Eastern philosopher. This isn't necessarily Christian responding, but I do think that these are techniques that can work. If you take those incidents that kind of knock you on your heels, don't think of all of the stuff that's going on. Constrain yourself. Bring it down, bring it down, bring it down. Just what actually is it? I got a bump in the car, it won't start. That's all I know. Okay? Once I get it to a mechanic, I'll know more. I'm not going to borrow trouble and think about all the things it could be. I'm just going to do the next right thing, which you'll hear people in recovery say all the time. I'm just going to do the next right thing, not go off on these tangents. Yeah, my phone's going crazy. I should turn that thing off. Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think what he just said right there, if you can learn to do that and put it in practice, that is pretty helpful.
You're done, right? You're like that. You've always been like that. There isn't a chance that you can be repaired, and none of it is acceptable. It's like the person's going to fight with you right away, because what else are they going to do? So what you want to do is you want to minimize it. It isn't rationalization. You want to say, okay, this person did something that disrupted our joint map. Okay, what's the smallest possible thing they could do to put it back together? And you have to know. Well, we need to make a plan so you don't do it again. Or we need to have a discussion so that you know that it wasn't a good thing to do. But I'm not going to go after your whole character. I'm going to say, when I come home...
Yeah, I had a good boss, man. Good boss when I was working with refugee youth. And he would always say, you know, we'll have a conversation. And I always wanted to pin down, well, what do you mean have a conversation? That's not a solution, have a conversation. But that's kind of what he was doing in those conversations. He was taking whatever the incident was, and he was knocking off all the nonsense and just getting down to what it was, and then coming up with a reasonable plan to deal with what the thing actually was. I think that is a very helpful thing to do. I don't think AA teaches you that. I don't think resilient recovery teaches you that. It's something that a good CBT therapist can teach you, and it's something that you can learn if you just listen to other people, and you just and you meet somebody who's able to manage stress as well, and you talk it through with them. It doesn't have to be a counselor, just somebody who manages stress as well, or somebody who's a bit older than you and has been through a few more things than you have, who can talk you through it. And that's part of that is maybe what resilient recovery does, is it reduces the shame and that feeling of like I'm just an awful person and everybody can see it, and allows you to go, yeah, it's good to have a mentor in my life, and I'm going to cultivate mentors in my life. That doesn't mean I'm a loser. That means that I want wisdom and I want wise people in my life. And so, yeah, resilient recovery, Christian faith can help you get rid of some of that shame and allow you to take good steps, like get good friends around me that can talk to me when I get into a situation that's troublesome. Okay, so very good explanation so far. Very good explanation of what's happening when you get anxious and angry. And now some pretty good ideas about how to handle it.
And you're watching TV, just come to the door and say hello. Not, don't you love me, or something like that. It's like, no, you just have to walk to the door and like give me a hug or something, and then that's good enough. And so then the other person might be able to tolerate that much corrective information, maybe, if you're kind of nice about it, and you also understand that they're probably going to have something equally horrible to say about you in the next 15 minutes, because you're going to do something stupid.
I like that. So we're not going to turn it into, do you love me, and turn it into this whole rigmarole. I'm just going to say, hey, when you come in, can you say hi? Bring it way down, bring it to a manageable level, and only ask for the minimum that you need. Don't go to the heart of the relationship. And yeah, this is good advice.
So you don't want to open the door so that every possible snake comes crawling through, because that's a pathway to depression. And you actually see that happening in depressed people, is that every small event produces a cascade through their entire value system, and they end up saying, well, that's just another reason that I should jump off a bridge. And they really see it that way. It's really awful, because they've got...
Yeah, I'm thinking of this kid I counseled years ago. He had a friend, and the friend liked him and wanted to do things. They had similar interests. And he'd go like, hey, why don't we talk about you seeing this friend this week? And it was like, oh, he's going to be so mad that I didn't call him. And, he probably just thinks I'm a jerk and a loser. And you know, I never go out with him, and so he's going to think this and that of me. And, you know, it did. Just the simple, like, hey, why don't you call your friend, see how he's doing, turned into this whole cascade of, like, every reason in the book why he was just a horrible person and should just lay in bed and never get out of it. And he wasn't necessarily always suicidal, but he often just wanted to lay in bed and never get out of it. And I think that's really what's going on a lot of times in substance use too, is just everything's terrible, it's whatever, until I do the drug. Or doing the drug knocks at least some of that, you know, because at a certain point you just kind of get normal. It knocks off some of the terrible stuff and just allows you to be normal and manage, but it's killing you at the same time. Yeah, lots of good stuff here, man. How long is this video going to be?
No defenses. It's like, well, I didn't do so well in this course. It's like I'm going to get a bad mark in the exam. I'm going to get a bad mark in the course. That's going to screw up my ability to finish my degree. I'm never going to get into the field of my choice. It's just another piece of indication that I'm useless and that life isn't worthwhile. Bang, I'm going to jump off a bridge. And if you're really depressed, it's like each of those things hits you with the certainty of truth. It's
yeah, and I think for the person in substance abuse, it may not be I'm going to jump off a bridge. It's I'm going to commit slow suicide by just continuing to drink. That the logical conclusion to how awful I feel about this one relatively minor thing is I should just drink. What's the point? I'm never going to make it in college anyway. If we use that example, right? I'm never going to make it in college anyway. It's good. Some of this stuff I feel like I've kind of known as a CBT therapist and used and explained to people, but this breakdown of it is so like precise and so well said that it's really genius. And it's highlighting something that I've kind of always known was true, but couldn't explain it as well as Jordan can. And yeah, it's sparking a lot of ideas for me right now.
really not good. And so you want to be careful. You want to be careful about walking down that pathway. When you make a mistake, you think, okay, what's the narrowest framework of interpretation within which I can understand this that will require minimal behavioral change to decrease the probability that it will happen again.
So that's really good. So he's saying it almost like it's a computer program, right? Where it's like a logarithm. He's saying let's minimize what the thing is that's bothering me down to the smallest unit that I can say that it is. My car's broke. I got a bad grade. My boss had a talk with me. We take it down. We don't include all the things that I think it might mean in the future. We just bring it down to that. And then behaviorally, I do what's the next right step that is a small enough step that it doesn't overwhelm me, but it's a big enough step that it does something to affect change. It does something to address the issue that's just come up before me. What would I say as a Christian? I think that really makes sense. I've seen some of the Eastern philosophy guys say, well, if something bad happens, you can't control it. You should just become willing to experience everything as it is, and you become willing until you have no will of your own. You just become sort of this amoeba that floats through the universe and nothing bothers you because you don't really have any expectations. Yeah, but I don't want to live like that, and I'm not an amoeba, and I don't want to just exist and float. I want to do things, and I want to correct things, and I want to be better for my wife and kids, and this approach gets at that. So what would I add to this? Prayer. Prayer can be a great way to interrupt that kind of faulty thinking and remind you that you're forgiven, that you're a child of God, that you've got this, that God is with you. You can take the next step because it's not just me, it's not all on me. I've got God going alongside alongside me as I take that next step. He's already planned that next step for me, and so I'm confident that it will work out. And if it doesn't, I'm still confident that he's got this situation, so I can take the next step. So that's huge. Prayer, and then just having God go alongside with you would be things that I would add to this approach. Like, once you understand the problem the way Jordan has talked about it, prayer and having God go with you are great ways to manage stress. And then I mentioned before, get around a group of people that have been through some things, and that you can talk to them when something goes on. So that might be your recovery community, or even better, a church full of people. And again, God can come in to your life and remove that guilt and shame, so that now I'm able to form some of these relationships with people that I thought previously were just going to judge me and hate me and realize all my defects. The other thing is that once you start hanging around people at church and a recovery group, you realize some of these people who look like they've really got it all together are inwardly freaking out just as much as you are, and they lean on people to help them. And so it just kind of normalizes the whole thing. We're not made to manage this stuff on our own and then run to a bottle when it gets too much. We're made to reach out to other people, and recovery groups and churches allow us to do that. So, wow, what a great video. Holy cow. You're sitting in that class. How could you even take that all in? But he does such a great job of laying it out conceptually and then giving you the concrete examples, so that if you didn't catch the conceptual thing, oh, okay, now I caught that, and I can go back and catch the conceptual thing. Guy's good. Guy's good. And he does it in a way that I just haven't heard it before. Some of it's not necessarily new, but the way he said it was new and accurate. It just made it kind of hit home. Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts about this video, actually, but I'm going to end it here because that's probably pretty good. But yeah, so far of the videos that I've seen, this is one of my favorites. Another one was the Time of Grace video where he's talking about Moses. That one's good too. I'll put a link to that in the bottom. But thanks for listening, coming along with me. I use these things to kind of sort through how to help people, how to help myself, how to share what's helping me with other people. And sometimes that ends up in a blog entry or a PDF that I give away, or maybe a lesson that I do for Resilient. And so it's helpful to me. If you coming alongside, watching me react to these is helpful to you, great. Let me know in the comment section. And we'll see you on the next one.